Welcome to TonightTales Audio, where quiet moments become unforgettable stories. Sit back, relax, and let tonight's tale begin. The sun was already warm over the street as Sarah turned the corner. The air carried that soft scent of summer, warm asphalt, freshly brewed coffee, and something sweet from the bakery further down. She ran a hand through her hair and adjusted the strap of her bag on her shoulder. The workday had been long, but not heavy, and there was something about summer that made everything feel lighter. Outside the café, small tables stood in the sunlight. People leaned over their cups, lost in conversations that seemed to slow time itself. A bicycle bell rang somewhere in the distance. Someone laughed. Sarah opened the door. The small bell above it chimed softly. "Hi," the barista said from behind the counter, smiling. "Hi," Sarah replied, returning the smile. She didn't have to think about what to order. It was always the same. "A latte, please." The barista nodded, already starting. Sarah lingered for a moment, letting her gaze drift across the room. Same table, same shelf of books, same soft murmur of voices and the low hum of the coffee machine. She took her cup when it was handed to her and walked toward her usual spot by the window. She sat there almost every day after work. Her studies demanded time, and at home it was easy to get distracted. Here, it was easier to focus. She sat down, opened her bag, and took out her books. Her pen rested beside her notebook. For a moment, she just sat still. Sunlight streamed through the window, warming her arm. She took a sip of her coffee and exhaled slowly. The warmth spread gently through her body. It was always that first sip that made the difference, as if the day finally settled into place. She leaned back slightly in her chair, letting her gaze wander across the room, more out of habit than curiosity. That's when she saw her, and she noticed her immediately. The woman behind the counter moved calmly, almost confidently, as if she knew exactly what she was doing. And yet, something about her still revealed she was new. Dark hair, a posture that was relaxed, yet steady. Sarah felt her gaze linger. There was something about her. Not just that she was new, she was attractive. Not in an obvious way. More in a quiet, natural way that drew attention without trying. Sarah felt an unexpected warmth spread through her chest and lowered her gaze to her cup again, almost a little embarrassed. This is ridiculous, she thought. She didn't even know her. And yet her eyes drifted back up again, almost on their own, just for a second, just to look at her once more. Sarah pulled her book closer and leaned forward over the table. She followed the lines slowly, focusing. One sentence, then the next. She blinked, frowned slightly. She had already read that. She took a slow breath and started over from the top of the page. This time, she would focus. The words moved in front of her. She tried to hold on to them, to understand, but her thoughts wouldn't stay. A few minutes passed. She noticed it again. Same page, same paragraph, same sentence. Sarah leaned back in her chair and let out a quiet sigh. She took another sip of her coffee and looked down at the book. "Okay, one more time," she murmured softly to herself. She began again. But before she had even reached halfway, her gaze lifted on its own. Toward the counter. Toward her. Kim stood there, speaking with a customer, calm, focused. A small smile as she handed over the cup. The customer returned it with the same warmth. They exchanged a few words, something light that made them both laugh. Sarah noticed how the man leaned slightly forward, as if he wanted to stay just a little longer than necessary. His tone was friendly, almost too friendly. She watched the scene without really thinking. Something stirred faintly in her chest. Not painful, just unexpected. She lowered her gaze back to the book. "Stop it," she whispered quietly to herself. She traced her finger along the edge of the page and took a slow breath. "He's just being nice," she thought. It's her job to be nice back. And I have no reason to feel jealous. The words made sense. They were logical. And yet the feeling lingered a moment longer, like a quiet warmth that refused to disappear. Sarah took another sip of her coffee and tried to focus again. This time, determined. The words finally began to settle. "Nope." Her gaze lifted again. And this time, it lingered just a little too long. Their eyes met. Sarah felt warmth rush to her cheeks and quickly looked back down at her book. Kim remained where she was, watching her with a calm, curious, warm expression, as if she had noticed something too. Sarah's heart beat faster. She tried to read again, but it was pointless now. A few minutes passed. She heard footsteps approaching through the soft cafe noise. "Excuse me, would you like some more coffee?" Sarah looked up. Kim stood beside her table, holding a coffee pot. The scent of fresh coffee rose between them. Her heart skipped again. "Yes, please," she said, gently pushing her cup forward. Kim leaned in and poured, her movement steady. Calm, soft. Sarah met her eyes for just a second longer than she meant to. Kim smiled again. "Enjoy your coffee." "Thank you." For a moment, neither of them looked away. Then Kim turned back to the espresso machine, and Sarah wrapped her hands around the warm cup, wondering why her heart suddenly felt just a little lighter. 2 days later, rain tapped softly against the pavement as Sarah hurried toward the cafe. Drops bounced against the ground, forming small ripples in the puddles. She pulled her jacket closer and brushed a few strands of damp hair from her face before opening the door. The small bell chimed gently. Warmth wrapped around her instantly. The scent of coffee and freshly baked pastries filled the air, a soft contrast to the gray world outside. She stepped up to the counter as usual and ordered her latte. Everything felt familiar, safe. When she took her cup and turned toward her usual table, she stopped. There was already a small plate waiting for her, and on it, a pastry. Beside it, a small handwritten note. "To Sarah, hope your day gets a little sweeter." She looked around instinctively, almost as if she had misread it. The pastry was simple but carefully made. A thin layer of glaze, a few berries on top. It looked homemade. Sarah slowly lifted her gaze. Kim stood behind the counter. Their eyes met. And in that same moment, the smile appeared. A quiet, warm greeting passing between them. Something unspoken. And after that, it kept happening. Small things. Little details that made Sarah smile before she had even fully stepped inside. One day, her coffee was already waiting on the table when she arrived. Steam rose gently from the surface, as if someone knew exactly when she would walk through the door. Another day, there was an extra biscuit placed beside her cup. Nothing was said. Just a brief glance from the counter, a soft smile. Sometimes their eyes met across the room. Short, warm, like a silent conversation. Sarah began to notice more details, too. The way Kim always tied her apron the same way. How she hummed quietly to herself when the cafe grew calm. How she sometimes laughed a little louder than she meant to. And then glanced around, slightly embarrassed. And each time, Sarah felt something small shift inside her. Something growing. Something she didn't quite know how to name yet. It was a quiet afternoon at the cafe. The rain had eased for the moment, but the sky remained gray. The soft hum of the coffee machine and low conversations filled the room. Sarah sat at her usual table, her book open in front of her. She was reading slowly, but not very focused. That's when she noticed Kim untie her apron. She spoke briefly with a colleague, wiping her hands against the fabric before hanging it on the hook behind the counter. A break. Sarah tried to act like she hadn't noticed, like she wasn't following every movement. A small smile. Before she could react, Kim was already standing at her table. "Hi," Kim said simply. Her voice was warm, careful. "Hi," Sarah replied, feeling her heart beat just a little faster. Kim lingered for a moment, as if considering what to say next. Then she nodded slightly toward the chair across from her. Sarah blinked, surprised. "Oh, yeah, of course." Kim sat down and gently blew on her coffee before taking a small sip. A short silence followed. "You study a lot," Kim said after a moment, glancing at the book. "Science?" she added, pointing lightly at the page. Sarah looked down, as if she needed a second to remember what she'd been reading. "Yeah, I study part-time after work." Kim leaned forward slightly, curious. "That sounds interesting. What do you enjoy the most?" Sarah thought for a moment. "Biology, I think. How everything connects. The body, nature, life." Kim smiled. "I've noticed you here almost every day," she said softly. "Always with your books?" Sarah let out a quiet laugh. Their eyes met. A little longer this time, as if something between them had become easier, more natural. A colleague caught her eye and gave a small nod. Her break was over. Kim stood up slowly, running a hand through her hair, as if collecting herself before returning to work. "I should get back," she said with a small smile. Sarah nodded. "Yeah, of course." Kim took a small step back, then paused. "Have a nice weekend," she said. Then she turned and walked back toward the counter. Sarah remained seated for a moment. Tomorrow she would meet her friends. That was what mattered. Parties had never really been her thing. She could hear the music before she reached the door. Not loud, but enough to pulse softly through the cool evening air. Sarah paused outside for a moment, pulling her jacket closer around her. Warm light spilled from the windows onto the pavement. Laughter and voices blended with the rhythm of the music. She took a breath, then stepped inside. Warmth hit her immediately. The scent of food, perfume, and something sweet filled the air. Someone laughed loudly deeper inside the apartment. "Sarah!" She had barely closed the door before Lena appeared through the crowd, smiling widely. "You came?" Sarah smiled back, relieved to see a familiar face. "Yeah, I said I would." Lena pulled her into a quick hug. "You can leave your jacket there," she said, pointing toward a chair by the wall. "We just got started." Sarah nodded and slipped off her jacket, letting her gaze move across the room. People stood in small groups, talking. Glasses lifted. Music moved softly through the background. And then she saw her. Kim stood by a table, a glass in her hand, leaning casually against the edge as if she belonged there. She laughed at something someone had said, that same warm, spontaneous laugh Sarah recognized instantly. Her heart skipped, out of pure surprise. Kim looked up. Their eyes met across the room. And in that moment, everything shifted. Sarah stood still, her heart pounding in her chest. The music continued. Voices blurred into a distant hum. But suddenly, everything felt far away. Kim held her gaze for just a second longer than necessary. A faint smile touched her lips. Then she turned. Not quickly, not dramatically, just calmly, and began walking toward the hallway. Sarah stayed where she was for a moment. She didn't know why, but her body reacted before her thoughts could catch up. A warm nervousness spread through her. She glanced toward her friends who were still laughing at something around the table. "I'm just going to get some air," she said quietly. No one questioned it. They simply nodded. Sarah took a breath and followed. Her steps felt unusually clear against the floor, each movement more deliberate than usual. Her pulse quickened the closer she got to the hallway. The light there was softer, quieter. The music faded behind her. Kim stood in front of a mirror, adjusting her shirt. She met Sarah's eyes in the reflection before turning around. A brief silence settled between them. Not uncomfortable, just charged. "You too, huh?" Kim said softly. Her voice was low, warm. Sarah smiled faintly, a little uncertain. "Yeah, I wasn't expecting this either." Kim nodded slowly. "Me neither." Another quiet moment passed. Sarah felt her heart still beating faster than usual, each breath a little deeper. "How long have you been here?" she asked. Kim leaned lightly against the wall, relaxed but attentive. "Not long. I got here a little while ago." A small pause. "I didn't know you knew Lena." Sarah felt some of the tension ease slightly. "We work together sometimes," she said. "She convinced me to come." Kim smiled softly. "I'm glad she did." The words lingered in the air between them. Sarah felt warmth rise to her cheeks. She looked down briefly, fingers brushing lightly along the fabric of her dress. "Me too," she said quietly. Their eyes met again, then drifted, slowly, to her lips. And back again, as if something new had begun to take shape between them. Behind them, laughter echoed from the other room. Glasses clinked, the music swelled briefly, but here in the hallway it remained quiet, like a world of its own. Kim took a small step closer, not enough to touch, but enough for Sarah to feel her presence. The space between them narrowed, almost nothing left. Sarah remained still, her back lightly against the wall. Her pulse quickened, faster now. Her body already understood what was happening. Kim stepped past her without a word, opened a door beside them, then gently took her hand, just lightly, guiding her inside. The door closed softly behind them. The room was smaller, quieter, the light dim. Sarah felt the wall behind her, cool and steady against her back, and Kim, close enough to feel. They stood there for a moment, just breathing, just presence. Sarah met her gaze. It was steady, focused, not demanding, more like waiting, as if giving her time. "Kim," she whispered. Her name slipped out before she even realized it. Kim didn't answer right away. Her hand remained lightly on Sarah's arm, warm, grounding. Her eyes moved slowly over her face, lingering. Sarah felt her pulse rise again. For a moment, she thought she should say something. Ask what this was. Make sense of it. But no words came. She stayed. Kim stepped closer, close enough that their breaths blended. She raised her hand slowly, carefully letting her fingers rest against Sarah's cheek. The touch was warm, gentle, like a question. Sarah closed her eyes for a second, not to escape, but to feel. When she opened them again, the distance between them was gone. "Is this okay?" Kim whispered. The words were quiet, serious. Sarah felt something inside her let go. The hesitation, the need to control, the uncertainty. She nodded, just slightly, but enough. Kim leaned in. The kiss wasn't rushed, not demanding. It was soft, warm, almost careful, as if both of them knew this moment would stay. Sarah felt the tension in her body melt away, warmth spreading through her chest, down her arms. Her fingers moved slowly along Kim's arm, hesitant at first, then more certain. Her breath deepened. The kiss lingered, deepened, slowly, closer. And that night didn't end in the hallway. That night changed everything. Morning light slipped softly through the curtains. Sarah woke slowly, her body still heavy against the sheets, a quiet warmth lingering beneath her skin. She lay still for a moment, listening to the silence in the room. Then she got up and walked toward the window. Outside, the day looked clear and calm, like any other. And yet, everything felt different. Kim stood behind the counter when Sarah entered the café. Their eyes met immediately. A brief smile, a little careful. "Hi," Kim said. "Hi." A short silence settled between them. Kim reached into the pocket of her apron and pulled out a small piece of paper, placing it gently on the counter. "If you want," she said softly. Sarah took it. Their fingers brushed for just a second. Her pulse rose again. On the paper was a name and a number, a few days later. The days passed and their messages became part of everyday life. Sometimes they wrote late at night, when everything else had gone quiet. Sometimes just a few lines in the middle of the day. Sarah noticed how she began to look forward to the sound of her phone. How a single message could make her smile without even realizing it. And then, one evening, Kim wrote something different. "Kim, I have a small cabin by a lake, not far from here. It's very quiet there." Sarah, "That sounds nice. There's something calming about water." Kim, "If you'd like to come next weekend, it's really peaceful there. Just the forest, the water, and silence." Sarah, "I'd like that." She pressed send before she could change her mind. The phone rested still in her hand. The seconds felt longer than usual. Then it vibrated. Kim, "Then it settled. A short message, but it made Sarah's heart beat just a little faster." The gravel road crunched softly beneath the tires as the car moved slowly between the trees. The forest closed in around her, quiet, still, as if the world outside had already begun to fade. Sarah eased her foot off the gas, letting her gaze follow the narrow road as it curved gently through the pines. The air felt different here, fresher, calmer. She took a slow breath in through her nose, feeling the nervousness in her chest begin to stir again. Her thoughts wandered. What would this be like? Being here, with Kim, just the two of them. The road curved softly to the right, and then she saw it. The cabin stood there, simple, steady, nestled between the trees with the lake just beyond. The water shimmered faintly in the afternoon light, a soft breeze moving across its surface in slow, quiet ripples. Sarah slowed the car and came to a stop. The engine fell silent, and the quiet settled instantly, deep, surrounding. She stayed in the driver's seat for a moment, her hands resting lightly on the wheel. Her heart beat just a little faster. It was more beautiful than she had imagined. The car door opened. Sarah stepped out and looked around. "You found it?" Kim said, smiling warmly. Sarah looked up, and the tension in her body softened the moment their eyes met. Kim walked a few steps toward her across the gravel. "Welcome," she said gently, opening her arms slightly. The word lingered between them. The forest stood still around the cabin. The lake stretched out beyond, calm and open. A soft breeze carried the scent of water and pine. Sarah took another slow breath. "It's really beautiful here," she said quietly. Kim nodded. "I come here when I need to slow down." Later, the sun had dipped behind the trees, leaving behind a soft glow over the lake. The air had grown cooler now, almost crisp against the skin. Sarah sat on the wooden deck, a cup of tea warming her hands. She let her gaze rest on the water. Everything felt so still, so simple. Kim stepped outside, closing the door gently behind her. She held a cup as well. "Are you cold?" she asked. Sarah shook her head slightly. "No, it's nice." Kim sat down beside her. The chairs creaked softly against the wood. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the sounds of the forest, a bird somewhere in the distance, the wind brushing through the trees. "I've missed this place," Kim said after a while. Sarah turned her gaze toward her. "I understand why." Their eyes met. A little longer this time, as if the place itself was drawing them closer, as if everything here allowed them to feel more clearly. Small conversations became part of their days. They talked more now about simple things, about life there, about work, memories, and things that didn't always find space in everyday life. But the tension remained, quiet, present. A soft breeze moved through Sarah's hair, carrying the scent of summer and warm skin. She noticed how Kim's gaze lingered on her, following the movement, as if trying to hold on to the moment. Sarah drew in a slow breath, felt her pulse rise, just slightly. Morning by the lake. They stepped outside and sat down at the table on the patio. The morning air was fresh, the sun just beginning to warm the wood beneath their hands. Their cups rested between them, steam rising slowly into the quiet air. Kim smiled faintly. "This is the best part of this place." A short silence followed. Then she stood, glancing toward the lake. "Do you want to go for a swim?" she asked. Sarah followed her gaze. The water lay still in the morning light. She felt that familiar warmth of nervous excitement return. But this time, she smiled. "Yeah," she said. "Let's go." The path down to the water was narrow, soft beneath their feet. The grass was still damp with morning dew, and the air carried the fresh scent of water and summer. They walked side by side without saying much. They didn't need to. When they reached the dock, Sarah paused for a moment, letting her gaze drift across the lake. The surface was calm, only small ripples where the wind touched it. Kim slipped off her shoes and left them by the edge. Then she turned to Sarah. A playful smile curved across her lips. "Are you ready?" Before Sarah could answer, Kim began unbuttoning her shirt. Her movements were easy, natural, as if she had done it 100 times before. She placed her clothes in a small pile on the dock. Then the rest. Soon, she stood there, completely bare, the sun touching her skin, the lake stretching out before her. Sarah blinked, surprised, a laugh rising in her chest. "You're unbelievable," she said, smiling. Kim laughed softly. "It's so much better this way." Without hesitation, she took a few quick steps and dove straight into the water. A splash broke the stillness. Droplets caught the sunlight as they scattered into the air. After a moment, her head surfaced again. She brushed her wet hair back and looked up at Sarah. "Are you coming?" she called. Sarah stood there for a second, looking down at her, still smiling. Her pulse quickened. She took a slow breath, then she began unbuttoning her own shirt. A soft laugh escaped her before she even realized it. "It's probably cold at first," she said. Kim turned in the water, watching her. "It is," she said, "but it passes quickly." Sarah stepped forward. The water wrapped around her body, the initial cold already beginning to soften. She ran her hand through the surface and lifted her gaze to meet Kim's. The sun rose slowly behind the trees, casting light across the water. They swam in silence for a while. After a few minutes, they made their way back to the dock and climbed out. Water dripped from their skin, falling back into the lake. Kim reached for a towel and dried her hair. Sarah stood still for a moment, letting the sun warm her skin. It felt easy to be here, easy to be with her. Kim glanced toward her. "Should we make breakfast?" she asked. Sarah nodded. "That sounds perfect." They picked up their towels and walked slowly back toward the cabin, the sun at their backs, warmth returning to their bodies. And somewhere inside Sarah, a quiet feeling grew, that she had ended up exactly where she was meant to be. The scent of coffee filled the cabin as Sarah stepped in from the patio. Her hair was still slightly damp from the swim, her skin holding onto the warmth of the sun. Kim stood by the stove, stirring something in a pan. Her movements were calm, familiar. "I hope you're hungry," she said without turning. Sarah smiled softly. "Very." She sat down at the table, letting her gaze drift across the small kitchen. The window was slightly open, and a cool breeze carried in the scent of forest and water. Kim placed the plates on the table and sat down across from her. A quiet moment settled between them. Not uncomfortable, just still. They began to eat. The soft clink of cutlery against porcelain filled the space, while somewhere outside, a bird called from the trees. Sarah glanced up at Kim. She noticed how her gaze lingered, just a little longer than usual, as if she were thinking about something. "What are you thinking about?" Sarah asked. Kim took a slow breath, her eyes resting on Sarah. "About how easy it feels to be with you," she said. The words were quiet, but clear. Sarah felt her heart skip slightly. She didn't answer right away, just listened. Kim leaned forward slightly, her fingers resting around her coffee cup. "I haven't felt this in a long time," she continued, "and I don't want it to be just a weekend." The silence between them changed. It deepened. Something more real now. Sarah felt a warm nervousness move through her body, but it wasn't frightening anymore, just honest. Kim met her gaze. "I like you, Sarah," she said softly. "And I was wondering—" She paused, as if gathering courage. Then the words came. "Would you be my girlfriend?" The room grew still. Sarah felt warmth rise in her chest, all the small moments suddenly coming together. The coffee, the glances, the laughter by the dock. Everything. She smiled, a calm, warm smile. "Yes," she said, just one word. But it carried everything. Kim let out a quiet breath, as if she had been holding it longer than she realized. Then she smiled back. Outside, the lake lay still in the morning light. The wind moved softly through the trees, and nothing felt uncertain anymore. Because sometimes love doesn't arrive all at once. Sometimes it grows quietly, in small moments, shared mornings, and simple conversations. And sometimes it begins with a cup of coffee and stays long after. Thank you for spending your time with TonightTales Audio. If this story made you smile, think, dream, or simply helped you relax, let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you'd like more stories like this. Every comment, every like, and every listener means more than you know. Until our paths cross again in another story, thank you for listening.